The Star Wars fandom is one of the largest communities built around a fictional universe, and while those Trekkies certainly come close, I hear they've even got some pretty good YouTube channels up and running these days, plug, nobody beats Star Wars when it comes to controversies that divide the fandom. Speaking of which, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 Star Wars controversies that divided fans. Number 10. Did Luke use the dark side on the Gamorrean Guard? Return of the Jedi marked the end of the first trilogy in the Star Wars franchise. Here, our central protagonist was in the final stages of his hero's journey. He was no longer the naive idealist who sought adventure and kinda fancied his sister. Instead, he had become a battle-seasoned starfighter and a confident Jedi Knight. Episode 6 saw Luke entering Jabba's palace before using a most un-Jedi-like technique on a pair of Gamorrean guards, that being, of course, force choking. This triggered a long-running debate about whether or not Luke channeled the dark side in this scene, and this is a debate that has been fueled by all the contradictory material surrounding it. See, in Empire Strikes Back, Yoda specifically told Luke that the Jedi use the Force only in defense and never to attack. So throttling a few helpless pig guards seemed a little bit out of character. In later Star Wars Legends novels though, Luke's actions were somewhat redacted. In The Heir to the Empire, for instance, one line reads, quote, "Walking into Jabba's palace on Tatooine 5 years ago, using the Force to befuddle the Gamorrean guards," end quote, indicating that Luke's actions were some kind of mind trick rather than an act of violence. On the other side of the argument, this action is indicative of Luke's entire struggle. After all, he was dabbling in the dark side throughout Return of the Jedi, even channeling hatred to cut off Vader's hand in their final duel. Number 9. Midi-chlorians. Throughout the first trilogy, the Force was presented as a mystical energy not dissimilar to magic. Indeed, those who believed in the Force were considered to be superstitious. Vader was described as having a, quote, "sad devotion to that ancient religion," and even Han Solo dismissed it as hokey. Although it becomes clear that the Force is very real in this universe, it was never quite clear what it was. It was just one of the features that blurred George Lucas's epic sci-fi tale into the realms of fantasy. With the prequels, however, Qui-Gon Jinn explained that the Force was largely to do with microscopic intelligent life forms called midi-chlorians. They attached themselves to Force-sensitive beings, forming a symbiotic relationship which gave Jedi their power. One could even measure someone's midi-chlorian count through scientific testing. For many fans though, this explanation seemed to ruin the magic of the Force entirely, demystifying it with a load of scientific sounding jargon. It also begs the question, why was everyone in the original trilogy so skeptical about the Force's existence when there were established scientific ways of measuring it just years before? Number 8. Jar Jar Binks. Each Star Wars trilogy has had their own controversial alien species. The original movies had the Ewoks, the sequels contained the Pogs, and the prequels contained Jar Jar Binks. When the prequels dropped in the early 2000s, they were bombarded with criticism, and Jar Jar became a central target of this ridicule. He was described as clown-like silly, and even accused of playing into racial stereotypes. For those who were old enough to see the original trilogy when it came out, the childish aspects of Jar Jar simply trivialized the Star Wars universe. For those who were children during the prequels though, Jar Jar was a favourite. He was the comic relief in a story that became very dark. So this divide in opinion kinda comes down to just being an age thing. The backlash received by the character though actually did lead to George Lucas discarding a plot point that gave the Darth Jar Jar theory some credence. Ahmed Best as well, who played Jar Jar, admitted that the character was actually supposed to have a much more sinister story arc. There was even a scrapped scene in which Palpatine confided in Jar Jar about his plans for the Empire, but Lucas rightly didn't push his luck with this character anymore. Number 7. Does the HOLDO maneuver make space battles redundant? No matter how you felt about the sequel trilogy, it must be admitted that those movies were visually stunning, and no scene was as awe-inspiring as the moment when Vice Admiral HOLDO committed the ultimate sacrifice. Piloting her ship into the oncoming First Order fleet, she engaged the hyperdrive and utterly destroyed her foes. It was a kinda take your breath away moment, but this also had huge implications for not only the future of Star Wars, but all the previous movies to date, and the fandom jumped right on it. And that's because if using a hyperdrive in this way was possible, then why was it the first time anybody had done it? With just a simple push of a button, the Rebel Alliance could have avoided losing dozens of ships during both attacks on the Death Star. Of course, the Reddit community is filled with counter-arguments about why this was. Namely, that although it is possible, the logistics of such a maneuver are so complex that it simply would be too difficult to replicate on a regular basis. Number 6. The Changing Force Ghosts. The retrospective changes George Lucas made to his original trilogy have long been a topic of contention among fans. The theatrical cuts of A New Hope, Empire, and Return of the Jedi were all considerably different to the 1997 special editions. Previously, cut scenes were added in, including Han's confrontation with Jabba in A New Hope, and other additions included digitized backgrounds and characters. Just prior to the release of Revenge of the Sith, Lucas made further changes for the 2004 DVD release of the original trilogy. As you might remember, the climax of Return of the Jedi saw Luke share a touching moment with the Force ghosts of his former teachers and father. It was heartwarming stuff, and originally Sebastian Shaw, who played Darth Vader, appeared as the redeemed Jedi Anakin Skywalker, but after the DVD release, Hayden Christensen was spliced in. On the one hand, this seemed like a clever way to tie the prequels and the originals together. On the other hand, it felt like a slight to the actor who portrayed Vader in his moment of redemption. Not only that, but if Anakin really did bring balance to the Force, surely his Force ghost should represent him at the age at which it happened. Number 5. Luke's regressive story arc. Reducing Luke Skywalker to a bitter old hermit who drinks alien sea cow milk and has no interest in battling the Sith was one hell of a thing to do to the former savior of the galaxy. On the one hand, this subversion of expectations reminded audiences that even legendary heroes were susceptible to falling into despair. It also offered Rey a serious character development moment as well, as through Rey's steadfast tenacity and her willingness to resist the dark side and save Ben, Luke was encouraged to renew the fight against the Sith. Well, that's what the filmmakers were going for, and that's how some interpreted this plot point, but others didn't take kindly to it at all. Instead, they were perhaps rightly annoyed that Luke essentially just sulked on his island refuge until the ever-predictable Force ghost of Yoda showed up to give him a pep talk. Huge numbers of fans, including Mark Hamill, thought Luke's character was at best pitifully underused, and at worst had his legacy dragged through bantha crap. Number 4. The Ewoks. Just like Jar Jar Binks, your perception of the Ewoks likely comes down to the age you were when you first saw them. If you were a kid, the cute little fuzzy things made for a great cuddly toy. But if you were older, you likely saw them for what they ultimately became: a merchandising opportunity. It wouldn't be the last time George Lucas was accused of introducing characters that could later be used as a money grab either. With this one then, it all kinda depends on a matter of perspective. Sure, they look kinda dumb and they get totally manipulated by the rebellion, and there is the small detail of them wanting to cook and eat our heroes, but their miraculous victory over the stormtroopers also represents a central theme of Star Wars, that being the triumph of the underdog over the oppressor. Number 3. The ambiguous moral compass of the Jedi. The Jedi have long been considered the most noble and honourable people in the Star Wars universe. They wield extreme power but only use it for good, or at least supposedly. They are the keepers of peace and the last and only real defense against the ever-rising dark side. Having said all of that though, the Jedi did do some pretty reprehensible things, leading many in the fan community to reconsider their thoughts about these light side Force users. For starters, young Force-sensitive children were torn away from their parents at an extremely young age by the Jedi Order. This was purely so the individual could be indoctrinated, having the notions of love and attachment driven out of them, which does sound a little cult-like to me. The Jedi also became extremely dogmatic and rigid. The idea of individuality or autonomous thought was so rejected that it led them to shun extremely wise Jedi like Qui-Gon Jinn. Their ways even forced individuals like Count Dooku and Anakin Skywalker to join the dark side. Number 2. Was Anakin the actual Chosen One? The Chosen One prophecy is the catalyst that triggers the entire Skywalker saga. The central conflict of the story is all about bringing balance to the Force. In the original trilogy, Luke is presented as the one who will overthrow the Sith and restore balance, but as it turns out, Darth Vader actually does this when he kills the Emperor. For all of their issues, the prequels did a wonderful job of giving background to these events. Although Qui-Gon Jinn did not see the horror that Anakin would bring to the galaxy, he was correct in believing that he would ultimately destroy the Sith and fulfill the prophecy. That was until the sequel trilogy anyway. With the return of Darth Sidious and the rise of Skywalker, all of that kinda went out the window. Now this film skips over exactly how he came back, merely offering a line from Poe Dameron that says, somehow Palpatine returned. No matter the intricacies of how this happened, Palpatine did come back, and Rey eventually destroyed him, once again bringing balance to the Force. But if Palpatine wasn't really dead at the end of Return of the Jedi, then were the Sith ever really destroyed by Anakin? You can see why this one divided people. I mean, the Chosen One prophecy is the plot point that underpins the entire conflict of the first two trilogies, and Anakin's redemption arc is what made this story so loved, and the sequels kinda undermined that. Number 1, who shot first? We've already discussed how George Lucas went about altering his original movies over the years, and for the most part, these changes were kinda inconsequential. But one change that will forever keep fans talking is the infamous face-off between Han Solo and the bounty hunter Greedo. In the most readily available versions of A New Hope, Han is forced to shoot Greedo after he pulls a blaster on him. Dodging the bounty hunter's shot, Solo returned fire with deadly accuracy. In the theatrical release, of course, Solo just blasted Greedo while he was flapping his mouth. This all boils down to Lucas's concern that he'd originally depicted Solo as a brutal killer. Thus, he altered the scene to make Han more sympathetic, and over the years this has been altered numerous times further, with the firing rate being sped up or slowed down to make the scene that bit more ambiguous. So, that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Please give me your take on these controversies, and are there any divisive moments I missed off here? While you're down there as well, can you please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to What Culture Star Wars for more lists and news like this on the regular. Even if you don't know, I've been Josh, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.